Okay, we're now live.
Welcome to Heritage at Home, the series where we discuss history, heritage, and all things digital. Today, we're going to be looking at the Lost Castle at Helmsdale in Sutherland and thinking about some recent work to digitally recreate it. And I'm delighted that we're joined by Jackie Aitken, who's a return guest and who's an archaeologist who's been researching the castle and is also digital curator at the fantastic Time Span in Helmsdale. Jackie, hello, welcome.
Hi, Beth. It's really lovely to be here again, and yeah, getting quite used to the setup now, aren't we?
It's fantastic to have you back. Thank you so much. Sharing different aspects and slightly earlier aspects of Helmsdale's history.
Yeah.
Seen Jackie's fantastic discussion of some objects from the 19th century fishing traditions in Helmsdale. Do go and check it out. But today we're talking about a slightly earlier period. We're talking about the castle, which is something that we've been doing a bit of collaboration with you on, actually. We've been collaborating on a reconstruction of what it might have looked like maybe in the late 19th century. And I'm really lucky to also have with us, we've got my colleague Alan Miller and my colleague Ian Oliver, both from the Open Virtual Worlds team at the University of St Andrews, which works on the project with you. So it's great to have you here and to be talking about it.
Thank you. Yes, so I think, first of all, just to set the scene for everybody watching us today, Ian, so I think if we put up the slide showing the place and location. So I think we're just about to see.
That's great. If you can share with us a bit about where the castle is.
Yeah, because with this technology, we can get to quite a far audience. So I think we do need to start off with a map just to kind of give us that idea of where the castle was. I think we're possibly nearly there now. So as we've said, the castle was located at Helmsdale. And if you can see the map on the screen, it's actually on the east coast of Sutherland. Very good, that's a nice close-up view. And so there the arrow is pointed to Helmsdale, approximately 75 miles north of Inverness. You'll know Inverness as the capital of the Highlands. And just in the right-hand corner of the map, there's a small little inset from an extract from Blau's Atlas of Scotland, dated 1654. And the castle's actually depicted on the coast at Helmsdale in that map. It's probably the earliest depiction of the castle that we have. So yes, that was 1654. So yeah, going back quite a long way. Yes, and that is the location. But in terms of the castle itself, I think we're going to have a look at where it was actually physically located on the land. So I think we've got a photosphere, don't we, Beth?
Yes, because where it is has changed quite a lot. Today, it doesn't look exactly how it did. Ian, can you show us what the place looks like today? Where the missing castle would have stood?
Where was it?
And that's the thing, it's so lovely to think about the different layers in the landscape and sort of the things that we've learned, the items of heritage that are no longer there.
Yeah, the location of the castle, it's, you know, on the physical terrain itself is actually quite it's quite important to all aspects of life at the castle and the demise of the castle as well. And I think we might just be coming. Oh, now that is so I think it's the photosphere, Alan. If we don't have it, that's okay. We can.
You want to describe for us what that area looks like today? That'd be great.
Yeah. So I mean, the castle actually stood on the end of a steep bank at the south side of the mouth of the River Helmsdale. And actually, Ian, what we can do is, if we can put slide 2 up, that will show you very clearly. So on this is what we call a typical archival image of Helmsdale probably about 1900s, early 1900s. And you can actually see the ruins of the castle, and they're standing, on the headland to the south of the village. And that very traditional look of overlooking the Helmsdale harbour. So it's what people actually remember of the castle if they actually saw it before it became a lost castle. So this is people's memory of the castle itself. And I think that's quite a nice view of showing the terrain of the land and how in close proximity it was to the sea as well.
Yeah, so for many years, very much sort of an important landmark for the community in Helmsdale. Could you, Jackie, the castle has quite a long history. Could you tell us maybe a bit about the origins of the castle and sort of when was it built and why was it built where it was?
Certainly. So I think we'll move from this slide and we'll go to the next slide, which shows slide 3, which is shows a sketch of the castle in the mid-19th century. And then there's on the left-hand side, there's a character which looks very much like Blackadder, but he's a guy called Sir Robert Gordon. So we'll leave that 2 images up there for the moment as I explain a little bit about the beginning of the story of the castle. So as far as we're aware from records, and one of the main source of records that we do have is from this gentleman here, Sir Robert Gordon. Now, he is the second son of Alexander, Earl of Sutherland. Now, Alexander, his father, we will come to later on because he's involved in quite sinister goings on at the castle. But Sir Robert Gordon was actually a great writer, and he wrote a book about Sutherland where we get a tremendous amount of historical detail round about that tail end of the medieval period, from the 1550s, 1580s up to 1630. And Robert Gordon writes the book called A Genealogical History of the Earldom of Sutherland. And it's through his writings that we can glean the early information about the castle and what happened there. So we're very thankful to Sir Robert Gordon. So we have gleaned that the castle was built in around 1488 in the reign of King James III. It was built by a Margaret or Magdalene Bailey, Countess of Sutherland. Now, she was the wife of the 7th Earl of Sutherland, and we think it was probably built as a traditional hunting lodge, a kind of traditional tower house, if you like, house slash castle. Now, whether
you see quite a few of those, don't you, across Scotland?
Exactly, and some are more fortified and some are less fortified. Yeah. So it really depends on. Of course, this castle is in quite close proximity, or this tower house, to the main seat of the Earldom of Sutherland, which is Dunrobin Castle. And it is south along the coast, and it's only about 15 miles away. So you can kind of imagine that this is their, they might have rode out to their hunting lodge on a weekend to do some hunting. That's very plausible. You get that image of hunting, feasting, and all the things that would go on for the landowners at that time. It paints
so just for holiday cottage, just for weekend cottage, almost.
It's a very nice holiday cottage. It very much is. Now, Sir Robert Gordon actually does write quite a lot about the hunting that went on at this time, because it's quite nice to fit the castle into a context of what was kind of, what it was being used for. So if we think of the castle as a hunting lodge, then the evidence for this is that there were many areas in Kildonan that were forested at that time. And when we look for that evidence today, we do find small pockets of native woodlands or indeed early plantations, but a lot of that has been reduced, and now we've got obviously modern plantations. But back in Sir Robert Gordon's time, he writes of the forests of Kildonan, very near to where this castle is. This is a castle on the coast, and the hunting grounds are inland in the Strath of Kildonan. And he writes, all these forests and chases are very profitable for feeding the bestials and hunting. They are full of red and roe deer, wolves, foxes, wildcats, squirrels, weasels, otters, martens and hares. So it really gives you a picture of everything that was kind of being lived among these woodlands.
But it's lovely having that detail of the landscape and surrounding. It's great, that.
Yeah. It's lovely, and we're very thankful to. I've used a lot of what Sir Robert has written. It's very, very good for painting a picture. But by the end of the 16th century, the castle or lodge had fallen into disrepair, and it was either mostly demolished and rebuilt in the first decade of the 17th century, and it seems to have been transferred into the hands of Sir Alexander Gordon of Navadale. But it wouldn't really remain his home for very long, as we think Alexander Gordon moved inland to an area called Torish in 1621. And we are told from some written archival records that Alexander Gordon actually built another tower house at Torish. So it's obviously replaced this one on the coast for whatever reason. And so the history of the castle in the 17th and 18th centuries is somewhat sketchy, where it kind of, it's one of those periods we don't really have too much about. But then we'll pick up the story of what happened to the castle in its later years a bit later on.
It's some excitement in store, definitely.
Yes.
You talked about the castle. It's a late medieval castle. It's late 15th century it's originally constructed, which actually quite a few castles and tower houses in Scotland do come out of this time period. But can you tell us a bit about the original design of the castle? What was it like when it was relatively new?
Yes. So it's funny, in archaeology or in digital reconstruction, there's one thing that's really important to try and learn about what something looked like a structure, and we always look for a ground plan, something on the ground that gives us the shape and size of a building on the ground. So this is our first look at the castle reconstructed digital model. So if we can, Ian, if we can get a bird's eye view of the castle, the reconstructed castle, it will give us an idea what the ground plan looked like.
So this is a sort of digital project that we've been collaborating on together, isn't it? So representing the castle in its 19th century form, but from it we can actually think about what its earlier design was like a lot. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, so I mean, this is quite a nice view. I wonder if we get a tad closer to that view, Ian. If we just go down, this is a great thing. You can give directions and just move slightly closer and maybe just a little bit closer to it. That's perfect. We'll keep it there. That's even better. So so it's thought that the castle originally was a classic L-form castle. So it took the form of the L shape, but it also had a spiral staircase. So if you can see the central range, the central building block, with obviously this is the ruin as it appeared in 1890, which is the date of the reconstruction of this model. So this model is unroofed, but in the middle part of the range of buildings, you can actually see there's a circular feature at the upper end, and that is the remains of a spiral staircase, which would give you access to the different floors of the towers itself. So we think that as you're looking at the castle on your left-hand side, so we think that this was the original main tower block of the castle. And then there was a spiral staircase that gave you access to the different rooms in that block. And then the central block was also probably part of the original castle. And then if you move over to the right side of the screen, you'll see there's another walled opening there. And we think this is a later addition, and it could be another part building block, or it could be part of a courtyard. And on the map, it's to the southeast of side of the building. The actual, so from here, so we literally have on the left side, we have the oldest part of the building, and then on the right side, we have later additions. And Ian, I think what we could do now is we could go to the only plan that's ever been made of the castle. So there was a plan made by it was surveyed, and that's in our slide 4. So what happened in 1911, there was a major survey and inventory of all the sites and monuments in Scotland by the Royal Commission. Oh, it's the slide just after that, Ian, just the one next to it, the next one. And that's the one, perfect. So we are very, very fortunate in that when the Royal Commission came, they actually made a simple plan of the castle. So you can actually see it here. And at the top, so if we look to the right of the screen, but to the top, you will see that there's the original tower. The central part with a spiral staircase, and then at the bottom of the screen on your right, there is possibly what was the courtyard. You can see a lot of other features as well. There's possibly fireplaces and windows, and I think we will come to later. On the left of your screen, this is so this is an early aerial photograph of the castle, and it looks around 1915, and again it clearly shows, yeah, it's quite amazing, really. And we really had to blow this one quite close up, and it shows the tower block quite, you know, certainly the main tower still surviving to a significant height. But if you actually look, something significant is happening to the south side of the structure of the building. The castle is, so you can actually see here that the south walls are already being undermined by the effects of coastal erosion. And the castle itself sits on an alluvial sandy headland, which has been constantly washed away with the effect, with many effects of weather conditions, storms, and big tides. So you can actually see there.
So we've got coastal erosion undermining sort of one section of the castle, which is, I think, has been a problem with quite a few archaeological sites in Scotland, that they were built, which were built on the coast. We sort of lost elements.
Yes, not too far from the castle here in Brora, where I am at the moment. So we have a lot of industrial sites, coal pits and salt pans, and they are, you know, some of the oldest salt pans in Scotland. And they have been eroding out successively in the last couple of hundred years. And it's really only through, you know, dedication from community groups and groups like the Skate Trust that monitor Scotland's coastlines, that we can actually do something about it. We might not be able to save the site, but we can monitor it.
At least know what's happening.
Communities can get together and we can fund excavations to record the site and retrieve any of the valuable objects and material culture that tells us how people lived at that time. So it is a big issue in Scotland, yes.
And it's so important to do this so we can understand what the sites we're losing are like. And we're so grateful. I mean, obviously maybe their techniques are slightly different, but we're so grateful for the work that earlier generations did to record Helmsdale, so we can have a look at it.
Well, we have a castle here in 1915. It's, I mean, you know, it's a castle. Yes, it's suffering from coastal erosion, but and that castle isn't here today. So something pretty serious must have happened to that castle.
Could you maybe tell us a bit about the exterior of the castle and what it used to look like?
Yes, I think that would be really good to give us an idea of what the castle looked like. So I think, Ian, if we could move to the next slide. That's great. So this is one of our earliest depictions through drawing and watercolor of the castle. It actually appears on, it's a little depiction on the inset of a map, which is really nice because on your left-hand side, you can actually see, on your right-hand side, you can actually see a very early depiction of Helmsdale. It's got the old Thomas Telford designed bridge, it's got the toll house, and it's also got the first curing yards that you can see just at the mouth of the river. And again, up on the headland, you can see the rather slightly romanticized artistic license kind of vision of what a romantic castle ruin would have looked like. I think it's managed to yeah, and but very interesting to have that view of the castle. Now it has been estimated through the only survey that was done of the castle, or the survey that was done in 1911, the oldest survey, that the castle survived to around about I think it was about sort of 15 meters high. So 15 to 20 meters high was the height of the castle. And we also know that the castle, the main tower, that you can see a bit of the main tower in this picture, that it was around 15 meters high by 9 meters wide. So this is not the biggest of tower houses. It's you know, it's a smallish tower house in overall dimensions. And in 1911, it was surveyed, and so it certainly was at a much higher extent than the remaining ruins. So it's obviously been tumbling away over the years. And if we move to the next slide, Ian, slide 6, that's great. Now, this is a really lovely drawing, ink drawing of the castle. And this was done by Elizabeth, Countess of Sutherland, in 1806. And again, it's a rather romanticized version of the castle, but she actually gives it quite a lot of detail for us to look at. And what's really interesting here is you can see quite a tall feature extending above what looks like the area where a roof would have been. And we think that's a big chimney stack that would have catered for all the fireplaces and all the rooms. So to see this in our reconstruction, I think we need to go back to the reconstruction, Ian, so we can possibly move back to the digital model.
But great having the context of the sorts of things that informs the model and the sorts of images.
Exactly.
We're back up
all
here.
This information was exceedingly useful in the reconstruction process. So what I'm going to ask Ian to do is there he, oh gosh, there's all the fifes going out to sea at Helmsdale. Brilliant. So we'll just stop there, Ian. Brilliant. So we're coming down on looking in the direction of the harbour mouth to the castle ruins itself, and we can see the walls of the castle. So Ian, what I'd like you to do is just take a very slow circular tour around the outside walls of the castle, and we'll just keep on stopping at various locations. I can see a little doorway there, and we'll move around. So we'll just take it slowly. So the walls of the castle were probably between 1.5 and 4 meters thick. I mean, castle walls are quite thick,
really.
It's quite thick. I think maybe 3 meters might be more like it, but in terms of when it gets down to the foundations, they can be exceedingly thick to carry the floors above. Now, the stone and material that was used in the making of the castle, the stones themselves, we'll just stop it there, Ian, for a second. So the stones itself were roughly hewn masonry blocks. And the local stone to Helmsdale is pink granite, but it also looks like in the actual reconstruction of the castle, which we'll see a little bit later in terms of the stones close up, we think sandstone was used as well. But there are different styles in the actual stone construction work. So we have got rounded masonry blocks, and then we've got more square shaped masonry blocks. And we've also got different patterns of packing stones used in different parts of the castle itself. Would it be possible, Ian, to move to the slide 7, and keep that view of the castle that we've got there, but move to slide 7? Because slide 7 is will give you a good idea in terms of comparing the reconstruction to actual.
Yeah, it's really nice to be able to see the parallels between what's sort of imaginatively recreated.
There we go. Fantastic. So what's interesting about this photograph, which was taken probably in the late 1960s, is that on your left-hand side, you can see that with that construction, you do have keyed in stones around the corners of the building, but it's quite rounded. The rubble, the big blocks are quite rounded, and they're not, they haven't got sort of squared corners. And if you come to the right side of the building, and if you go to the bottom of the photograph, you can actually see that the wall is actually quite different there. It's quite squared off blocks. Yeah. And we think it's because, as we said previously, the left-hand side is the older original part of the castle, and then the right-hand side has got more additions in later time, and therefore the construction techniques were different builders, different times, different techniques, which is quite interesting to compare.
Yeah, so they're moving from sort of relatively rounded, less shaped stones to having pretty rectangular cuts, sort of almost ashlar, in fact, so really clear rectangular stones.
Yes, they must have, obviously. I mean, this rubble kind of is this type of wall, which is quite the original part of the castle is quite a common technique in buildings, especially at Brora with the salt pans buildings there. We do see this technique where most of the wall has a rubble effect, but where you want the features to stand out, they are of better dressed stone, and we'll come to those in a minute.
Would it ever have had any sort of finish on it? Would it ever had any sort of rendering or harling or anything, or do you think it was left?
Well, that I have to say that is something I could not answer.
Sorry.
Oh, well, no, I mean, I think it's I've been thinking about that one a lot, and I would really hope maybe somebody listening in will be able to shed more light on that question, because it's possible. It is possible. And actually, when I look at this photograph now, with my eye, I'm kind of seeing some render on that wall, but I'm not sure. Am I just making that up? So I think the jury's out on that one. So there's a pointer for our listeners. So Ian, we could maybe go back to the reconstruction of the castle, and we'll keep doing a tour going around the castle itself. And that will give us an opportunity to look at the window and door surrounds of the castle. So that's nice. We'll just take it slowly as we go around the castle. So there you can see the south side of the castle, the later part of the castle there. Yeah, just quite very near that edge of that cliff there. And yeah, and as we come around, we can see the surrounds of the windows are actually quite, maybe we can come down just a little bit. Perfect, that's a lovely view. So we can actually see the window surrounds from the externally are looking quite impressive, are very well finished. They're made to impress. So if the castle did have a render, then it would all look pretty impressive indeed.
Yeah.
All round. Now, so what do we think in terms of a roof? So there is no, so we can move, continue moving around, Ian, around the castle, just giving it, everybody just a look, just slowly around. So the roof doesn't survive. And even in terms of looking at the photos, we look for wooden slots where frames of the roof would have sat. I've certainly not seen that, but that may have just collapsed quite a while ago. And so what the possibility is that it was, you can actually see, and this is actually in some of our archival images, that's a lovely shot, Ian, thank you, that you can actually see the crow step roof. It's kind of, so it's a crow step, which means that the roof is like it's like a steps, you know. It goes
it's like a staircase almost,
like a staircase, And so we do think in terms of tower houses, it may very well, it would have had quite a massive wooden frame to hold that roof on. And who knows, we're very near to Caithness. We've got Caithness flagstones. And it's not uncommon that roofs of buildings are made from Caithness flagstones. So did they ever excavate this castle? We'll find out later on. But without excavation, it's very difficult to make a judgment on what the roofing material was. So possibly, I'd like to think it was Caithness flagstone, but you never know.
It's one of those things to guess about.
And we'll keep on moving. In fact, we'll keep it there for a second because that's really quite nice. And we could maybe move to the next part of the building.
Yeah, well, could you maybe tell us a little bit about the interior and how the rooms inside worked and things like that? That'd be really great to hear about.
Certainly. So this is really good for me, just having this. I hope everybody else has joined this live tour. It's great. Imagine I can say to Ian, I just want to go into that room in the castle. It's fantastic. So Ian, what I think I'd like to do now is keep on moving around exactly the way you've been doing around the cat. Perfect. And as we go around, we are going to get a better view of the interior of the castle. So we'll keep on moving around. Just that's really nice. I mean, that's brilliant view, giving you the idea of where it's located on the coastal area. So we'll keep on moving around. And so internally, so we know that looking at from old photos of the castles, that there was at least one chimney stack. And if we just stop it there, so that big tall stack is probably the one of, in fact, there could be, I can see possibly two surviving chimney stacks, which is probably the most important part of the structure. I think if I was to live in a place like that.
You need to keep warm, wasn't you?
You certainly would. A cold, damp, stone-walled building, with big rooms. So if we actually move around a little bit further, Ian, and what we're going to do now is we're going to try and just that view is perfect there. Lovely. So we're going to get a nice view of the tower itself, the tower here. So so what we think is, again, yes, so the castle would have, so there would have been access to the castle, the two parts that we're seeing now through the spiral staircase. We think there was possibly three, if not a fourth, although we've not depicted a fourth, but there's possibly a fourth floor in the castle. But what was the division of rooms in the castle? Where were those rooms in comparison to what we can see in front of us? So we think that it is likely that the kitchen would have been on the ground level, which is in comparison to other tower houses.
Quite a usual thing to put
quite a utilitarian, you know, to service. And there is evidence in one of our archival pictures that at least one of the rooms had a vaulted ceiling, where the stonework was like an arch, a vaulted ceiling.
You get that with quite a few Scottish castles on the ground floor, don't you? Yes,
and certainly one of our paintings from the mid-19th century does show a vault at a near ground level, so that's a possibility. It could have been a workroom, it could have been a small dining room, a private dining room, and also we would have had bedchambers, we would have had a work or sewing room, maybe a guard cell possibly. but we also, looking at some of the other, maybe you can help me out with this, Bess, but in some of the other tower houses, they seem to have the great hall, the banqueting hall, on the top floor or near above.
Which is interesting.
So we think, looking at the model in the picture, where we have the crow step roof, possibly in the the floor below that, you can imagine the big beams of the wooden roof coming down to the great hall, and then you can imagine the fireplaces all around and the big table, and you can imagine people sitting there feasting. So I'd like to think that below that roof was the great hall where all the medieval feasting took place. So that kind of gives us a bit of a picture of what was happening. And this is kind of where we talk about something very relevant that happened in the Great Hall, Beth.
Well, yes, as you say, it's really interesting. So we've talked quite a bit about the design of the castle, but it's really interesting to think about the events that happened there and the people who lived there and things like that. And it wasn't all sort of peace and friendship all the time. There were some interesting incidents. Can you tell us about a sort of particularly scandalous incident that took place at the castle in the 16th century? Really quite horrific in some ways.
Yes, very horrific and very scandalous. So we're going to talk about murders that took place at Helmsdale Castle, and I'd like to think that it took place in the great hall that we've just been talking about in the castle where people were feasting. What I'd like to do, thank you, Ian. But what I'd like to do now is, so we go back to our archival source, our early archival source, and that's Sir Robert Gordon's account, and he gives us a great account of the events that took place in the castle and in the Great Hall. And it really portrays a darker side to the castle's history. And it all took place, so the castle is famed for a triple murder, which took place in July 1567. And like we've been saying, it took place during a post-hunt banquet that was taking place in the big hall. And the banquet guests were the Earl of Sutherland and his wife, the Countess of Sutherland, their son, but he was still out hunting at the time. So he wasn't actually feasting in the hall. It was just the Earl and his wife. And a lady called Isabel Sinclair of Dumbeath and her son. So these are the characters in our story.
So it's quite an aristocratic little group gathered together.
Very aristocratic. The assailant, Isabel Sinclair, she was actually the Earl of Sutherland's own aunt. And she had devised a fatal plan, allegedly in cahoots with the Earl of Caithness, in the hope of dispatching or murdering the young heir to Sutherland, enabling her own son to inherit the earldom. Very cunning.
Oh, yeah, not a lovely individual, that.
Well, these actions seem to be very cold and calculating to us, and they are.
Very.
But at that time, there was constant feuding between the Earls of Caithness and the Earl of Caithness and the Earl of Sutherland was rife. And it was usually over land or titles or gaining royal favour. And it just shows you the extreme measures they would go to get these land titles.
Absolutely, it's sort of power play, but also not really what you're meant to do. You're still
no,
a law dispute, but like, yeah.
So going back to the stone tower, as we're looking at it, you can picture it now. So the stone tower is probably where the guests assemble to eat and drink after the day's hunting. The drinks served to the Earl of Sutherland and his wife. I move now. Here we have the red wine.
Yeah.
So the drinks served to the Earl of Sutherland and his wife was laced with poison.
Shocking, shocking.
This is only salt, laced with poison. And during the meal, the Earl realised that there was something wrong with the wine, and his son, who had come in from the hunt, he warned him. So his son didn't actually drink any of the wine. They fled the castle, and they were feeling pretty sick. And they arrived at Dunrobin really ailing. And within 8 days, the Earl of Sutherland and his wife had died. But their son had escaped the poisoning meant for him. But there is, however, a twist to the story. When another poison goblet laced with poison that was meant for the young Sutherland heir was mistakenly given to Isabel's own son, and he drank the poison, and he died at the hands of his own mother.
No. So it ends up very, very dark story, really. Sort of.
But there's another twist. So there is another twist to the events. When Isabel, who's arrested, she's taken to Edinburgh and she's found guilty of this treacherous act. But there is a bit of a kind of controversy that the Earl of Caithness is highly embroiled in this as well. But it looks like the woman, Isabel Sinclair, is the scapegoat in this case.
So do you think because she is the woman, do you think she's getting the blame for it?
Well, I think somebody had to be blamed, and possibly, who knows? Maybe she was framed. We just don't know. But also, she is tried and found guilty, and just the day of, so she died on the day of her execution, but she died by her own hand, and she poisoned herself.
Gosh.
So it's
quite remarkable to think of this sort of unfolding with this sort of lovely spot like Helmsdale and things.
Well, I mean, it has the makings of an amazing story to tell everybody. So going back to the young Sutherland Earl, the heir, the young Sutherland heir, Alexander, he was actually, so his parents had died and he was coerced into marrying the Earl of Caithness's daughter, Lady Barbara Sinclair, and she was almost twice his age. He later managed to flee to Aberdeen, where he met and married Jean Gordon at Huntly Castle in 1573 and returned to his home in Sutherland. So he did, eventually, things kind of worked out for him. But sadly, Alexander died in 1594, leaving his wife, Jean Gordon, to manage the estate. Now, Lady Jean Gordon is interesting in her own right.
She was a person. Yeah.
She was the second wife of James Hepburn, the fourth Earl of Bothwell, who became, after his divorce to Jean, the third husband of Mary Queen of Scots. In Jean's early womanhood, she and her mother were confidants to Mary Queen of Scots, and they were very close. Jean is also famed for starting the salt and coal works at Brora. Her own son, Sir Robert Gordon, writes about her in a most praiseworthy way of her abilities, and he says of Lady Jean Gordon, "A virtuous and comely lady, judicious, of excellent memory and great understanding above the capacity of her sex." In this much be commended that she always managed her affairs with so great prudence and foresight that the enemies of the family could never prevail against her.
It's really amazing this later story she has after having sort of had this disastrous marriage to Boswell. Well, a marriage that ended rather dramatically with Boswell, and then sort of Boswell and Mary Queen of Scots and everyone all sort of die in the 16th century. And she lives a really long time, doesn't she? And sort of very effective sort of manager of her estates.
She very much is. She's my heroine.
Oh,
And
it's fantastic.
She actually married for a.
Yeah. Do we have a picture of her with us today?
We do. So. Pardon me. So, Ian, could we have a look at Lady Jean Gordon? And that is slide 10. And we've also got a picture of her husband, Earl John. So, it's after that. It's slide 10. There it is.
Oh, fantastic. So
there are the two main people of this. Well, the main person of the story. So this is John Gordon, John Earl of Sutherland on your left-hand side, and then we have Jean Gordon, his wife, on the right-hand side. Now, Lady Jean Gordon married a third time. So after the death of her husband, Alexander Gordon, who we can see in the picture here, she retired to Craighead on the coast, a little bit further to the south. And she dies, you're absolutely right, at a ripe old age, and she dies in 1629 at Dunrobin Castle, and she's buried at Dornoch. Amazing. So it's amazing all the connections that we have with these historical characters.
It is. It's fascinating, the sort of network of things. Now, we've got this point in the 16th century when aristocrats are coming to visit, where it's an important hunting lodge, where people are feasting. But the castle becomes abandoned, doesn't it? It stops being a great residence and sort of has a slightly different later history. Could you maybe tell us about what happens a bit later on in the castle story?
Certainly. So a little bit just before that, and I'll come on to that right in a second, but we've got another slide, which is slide 11, which is, so just to kind of finish that off, we have William Shakespeare. Yeah. And so all these tragic events that happened at the castle, it was said to have inspired Shakespeare, who wrote and published the play Hamlet in 1603, which kind of coincides with the possibility of the transmission of these stories. And I suppose we have to remember that this would have been, the House of Sutherland and these, the earls and countesses, they really were all involved in the royal courts at that time, and they were really, their lives were very much public knowledge. So, so stories like this would have been the gossip of the columns of the day.
And of course, post 1603, you've got connections between the Scottish royal court and the English royal court, with James VI of Scotland moving down to also become King of England in 1603. So you've got some passage between the trees.
Absolutely. So I would like to think that somehow William Shakespeare managed to hear that story while he had his quill in his hand and it got penned in some way. Although for Hamlet, we know that 5 people succumbed to poison. So a little bit, he obviously added a few more onto the story of Helmsdale. Yeah. So we'll leave that there for now. We'll talk about a little bit about the demise of the castle and the coastal erosion. So Ian, if we could go maybe to slide number 12, which shows, this is a lovely, again, view showing the castle in a wider prospect. So you can actually see it, and it's looking from the village of Helmsdale, and you're looking south along the coast to Portgower, and you can actually see the promontory quite clearly there. We do know that the castle, it was recorded that it was in ruins by 1858, and probably from quite a bit. It was unoccupied for a long time. Yeah. So it continued to demise, and parts of the structure literally just fell away just over time, as we know with all buildings that were not occupied. But it also suffered from the effects of coastal erosion, and we can clearly see the effects on the coast if we go to slide 13, if that's okay, and we'll have a look at that. So when you look at both of these photos, the photo on the left-hand side was taken in 1915, and the one on the right was about 1955. And you can see the significant levels of erosion, and literally that mound is just being eaten away and undermined. And we all know once vegetation has been loosened on these very soft sort of alluvial sand dunes, that it does get undermined very, very quickly. And even the effects of wind and rain would really make a difference on that.
So we've got a situation where it's sort of, it's falling up, there's the coastline is it's falling away. Maybe the castle seems a bit under threat, but there's a big event that turns out to be really fateful for why we don't have the castle today. Could you tell us a bit about why this is now a lost castle rather than something we can go and visit?
Well, this is the sad part of the story, but it has to be told to bring everything together. We'll just move on to the next slide, Ian. So just talking about the effects of moving on to the, oh gosh, if we can actually see that, that's a castle teetering on the edge there. So it did become destabilized, and also the coastline to the south of Helmsdale, for example, between the date of our model, our digital model, which is 1890, and around 1970, in some places along the coast to the south of Helmsdale, about 15 meters of coastline has been lost, which is a high rate of erosion. Funnily enough, the area to the north of the harbour of Helmsdale, there's actually been small areas of accretion where land has been gained. But that's not going to be the full story for in the future, because with the impact of climate change and rising sea levels, and if we don't act now, certainly the fate of not just castles, but also other structures will certainly take a significant blow in the future. But moving on to the final step of the castle. So the castle is really embroiled in, I suppose, a story of new developments and things that happen. So sadly, so we'll maybe move to, we'll wait for the film. I'll maybe just say this and we'll talk about the film, because then that will put it into context. So sadly, the castle was actually taken down, knocked down around 1970, when the A9 road was realigned and a new road bridge over the river up and up into Caithness was
so it sort of lost out as there was major road building along the coast and sort of an attempt to open up and develop the coastline. Was it possible for us to see that amazing video you've got of the dramatic end of the castle?
Yes, I mean, this is a so lovely. So this, we can see the film. It's quite blurry, but I think it really is quite it's quite clear what's happening. Oh, you can see the walls of the castle just tumbling down, and there is a digger or a tractor here. And look at that. So look at the piles of stone here from the castle walls, all tumbled down, being knocked down as part of just that little part of one of the walls that remains. It's
so this is happening in the 1970s within living memory, isn't it?
Yeah, around 1970. This is looking to the other end of where the road bridge would go through Helmsdale. So this is the area where the road bridge would go through, and you can actually see they're starting to to get the area ready for that. There's the harbour of Helmsdale, and it's just quite sort of evocative of that time, and people kind of, the last people to stand in the castle were those that were involved in knocking it down, obviously under other people's orders, of course. Oh my goodness me. As somebody who loves archaeology and loves castles and sites, it's quite shocking to look at in a way.
I think it's an important reminder of how much heritage we've lost over the course of the 20th century, and that it's still endangered in some cases in the 21st century. I know legislation has changed a bit, but even so, perhaps because of climate change and a whole range of other issues, a lot of heritage is at risk. Jackie, this is absolutely fantastic and it's so exciting. I'm wondering whether maybe we want to pause now and see if we've got some questions from online, because I've been so privileged to ask you lots of questions, but maybe see Alan.
Yeah, certainly.
I believe you might have some questions that people have submitted, and maybe we could sort of share them with Jackie. That would be great.
Well, yeah, that's fantastic. So one question was, what books are there about? Are there any books about the castle? And if there are any, are any of those online? Are they accessible to people?
Well, funnily, you should mention. Well, this is the main source of information, which is the book I was telling you about. This is Sir Robert Gordon's The Earldom, a genealogical history of the Earldom of Sutherland, and the big book it is. That's actually. I will put online after the event finishes. Yeah. There is a free PDF that people can access online of that book. So I'll put the link. So if you want any links to any reference material, we've got a lovely book on our Timespan website, Helmsdale Memories, which not just only talks about the castle, but also talks about some other parts of the history of the village of Helmsdale. And it's certainly worth, we can arrange to get that sent out to you safely.
That's fantastic. Thank you. That's great. Alan, is
Hello?
Hey, hi.
Yeah, I mean, so there was a lot of interest and chatting, but I mean, that was the main kind of informational question that came.
Could I ask a question to Alan, you and Jackie, maybe? Obviously, during our talk today, we were looking quite a lot at the recent reconstruction of the castle that Jackie, you've collaborated on, but also that Alan, our team in St Andrews, and in particular, my colleague Sarah Kennedy was really.
Yes, we please must mention Sarah Kennedy, because you know, I just have to thank Sarah. It was so wonderful to work with Sarah as a digital research fellow and the digital model maker that we liaise with. I think she did a great job.
Would it be possible for maybe, I don't know, as Jackie or whether Alan or Ian, someone to maybe share with us a little bit about the reconstruction process, about digitally recreating this lost heritage site?
Well, I suppose I'll just begin and then.
Jackie, thank you.
Because what I tend to do with any exercise, although we, you know, now that we've made a few of these digital models, what's really useful is we gather, for the castle, for example, we gather as much known information about the castle as possible. Yeah. So we're really looking for plans. Now, plans are a really good starting point for any structure. Obviously, some buildings and castles and so forth may not have plans. And so what we tend to do is we go to sites if they're still there, even as a ruin, and we'll actually survey the ground plan of a site. And then it's that information, that ground plan, the shape, the size, where things are. I send that over to Sarah, the digital developer, and I'd like to know what happens after that.
Okay. Well, Ian, you were involved actually with some elements of it, and have obviously collaborated a lot with Sarah and her work. Could you maybe tell us some about the technical side of creating a reconstruction once you've got the archaeological and historical information, and software and things?
Yeah, so we first find out where it is in the world, obviously, which happens early on, and then we acquire terrain data for that area, usually quite a large area around it, so that we can show all the hills and stuff. And then if there is a plan, like Luther was here, we place that on a map, so we can produce a map of the area, including with a place mark, and then a high resolution one with the plan included on the map. And then we'd create that map, and we'd import the terrain data into Unreal Engine, and then import that map, the 1 or 2 maps that we've created and import those into the map so that the plan will show up on the terrain in precisely the spot it's to be reconstructed on. And then at that point, I would hand that over to Sarah, who would then start to construct the building on the site of the plan and paint on the types of terrain, grass.
So start modelling walls, and she'd normally model shapes, wouldn't she? And then apply textures to it. So you'd have, okay, this is where the different walls are, and then like have the different textures of different types of stonework and things that we saw in the reconstruction. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we try to make the features as realistic as possible by not just saying it was stone. We say what type of stone, and then we go, so what size? And we want to make the wall, the external surfaces, we want them to look like the stone in the castle, to give it that authenticity. Therefore you can discuss those aspects of the castle about knowing that detail of it. So it's a little bit more in the process, you know, to actually getting all that detail in, which is back and forth.
So I've got a couple of questions actually. So Janet Tremor wanted to know, were there any salvage archaeological excavations done before it was torn down? Measurements, test trenches, anything? No is a simple answer. I mean, so I've been working at times for quite a few years now, and I'm amazed that even archaeological policy has changed since the kind of 1970s. But I'm amazed that there wasn't any kind of watching brief, or there wasn't any survey done, or indeed with a castle, you know, an excavation before the structure was demolished. So we don't really have much material or finds from the castle itself, which is such a shame. But we do have one survival from the castle, which was retrieved before the castle, quite a bit before the castle was knocked down, and we have one of the fireplace lintels from in the castle, which is quite a feature. And I think, Ian, you might have a photograph of that fireplace lintel, because it's in the Time Span Museum, but we take care of it, and so we look after it. But the interesting thing about that fireplace lintel is that it has a Latin inscription which is written on it, and there it is there. So you can actually see it's a sandstone finely made lintel, and it has got this Latin inscription. And if I translate that inscription for you, it will give you a little bit more insight into the psyche of the people where we are, and it always has been the case. And it goes, if you wish to be wise, I enjoin you to observe 6 things: what you say, and about whom, where, to whom, how, and when. And I don't think things have changed. So it's good, wise words.
It's lovely. It's lovely to have the voice of time. How are we doing? Are we talking time?
Alan McIver wanted to know what's happened to the stone when the castle. What happened to the stone when the castle was demolished?
That's a very good question as well. I can't say for sure, but I have heard some people locally have said to me some of the stone was taken across the river to make the foundations for the new road bridge. And that was one of the stories that I heard. So I can't authenticate that. But funnily enough, when I have my lunchtime walk, when I was at work, I would pass round the river to these foundations of the new road bridge, and I'd see this sometimes odd bit of sandstone that didn't quite fit all the other stones, and I did wonder whether some of that stone was used to shore up the foundations of the new road bridge. But I really don't know. That's just a local sort of story.
Cool, that's great. And the other question that I've got that's come in is from Sadie, and she wants to know, can you tell Jackie, can you ask how regulations have changed since the 70s and whether the castle demolition could happen today? And also, Kaylee Mackay, what website would the PDF for the book be on?
Yes, well, the simple answer to the second question, the PDF is on Internet Archive. So that's this, but I will share that in the comments. So if you want to come back to the recording of this event, I'll put a comment on there for you about the link. Yes, the legislation for archaeology, when I was studying archaeology, we learned about the different the ways that it had progressed, and I haven't got my books, my manuals with me, but I do believe that in the 70s and 80s there were improvements in the protection of archaeological sites. Now, for sites like a castle, you would expect that that site would come under a protection called scheduling. So scheduling a site is a is what is given to a site when, if somebody wants to come and develop on that site, they can't unless they get permission to do so. But literally it means that that site is protected against any commercial venture or development. And you would, I'm not quite sure the type of protection at that time was strong enough to protect the castle. Obviously it wasn't. But since then, the scheduling that is regulated by Historic Scotland or Historic Environmental Scotland does protect sites today. And we need more sites to be scheduled. We don't have enough, but if you can imagine, Scotland has got hundreds, if not thousands, of worthy sites that should be protected. And there does come a point when you think, can we protect everything? And if we can't protect everything, we do have to prioritise. And that's a difficult job for anybody to do, whether it's a local council or whether it is an archaeological body. But the most important group of people in terms of protection of archaeological sites, to me, is local communities. They are the active participants in their own heritage, and it's highly important that we have a say in the future of what is important to us where we live. So it has, I mean, it's certainly the case. You can make a difference if there is a site that you want to protect.
In the context of local communities, Jackie, you've got some great events coming up in Helmsdale, some great digital events. Could you maybe share a little bit about some of the upcoming events that are going to be there over the next few days, few weeks?
Yes, certainly. So yes, hopefully you'll come back for more to see some. We just literally seen the castle, but you probably saw in that digital model that there was a whole village of Helmsdale to explore as well. And with the wonderful team at St Andrews, we've made another 2 models. We have made Iron Age agricultural settlement in Kildonan, and we've also at Caen in Kildonan, we've also made a pre-clearances farming settlement. So we've got lots more digital reconstruction models to show you and amazing stories to tell. We've also got the launch of our major partnership project, Time Spans Real Rights exhibition, which launches on Friday the 29th of May, so not too long to wait. And the digital work is in partnership with the Open Virtual Worlds team, St Andrews, and also it's part of the wider Cine project that we are See the Past, Imagine the Future. So this has been a lot of work in progress, but we are delighted that it's the launch on Friday the 29th. And that exhibition will feature many important themes and issues, some of them that we have looked at today. We will certainly explore land ownership, land uses, from in the past to the present to the future, environmental issues. And we're also interested in looking at our colonial connections, our Highland connections with our colonial history. So we've got lots of fascinating things to explore. We hope you'll join us for that.
So there's so many more things to look forward to. Thank you so much, Jackie.
I think we might have a gift. I don't know. We've got a little. Did you get our little?
I don't know. We might be running out of time.
All right. Okay.
But thank
The
you.
gift went up. The gift went up. It was great. Great to see.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. And so Alan, thank you so much for.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for talking. Heritage at Home, please do join us again. We will be back on 4th of June, where we'll be discussing the wonderful Lords of the Isles site over at Finlagan on Isla and looking at some reconstructions there and discussing them with a panel. But today, Jackie, thank you so much, and thank you, everyone, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.